Forrest Gump wasn't just a movie. It was a story that crawled under your skin and stayed there. Every smile, every heartbreak, every twist. It all felt real. But there's one part of that story that never stopped haunting people. Jenny, the girl who dreamed of flying away from her pain, finally found her way back to Forrest, only for life to take her away too soon. Her death was quiet, too quiet. No long goodbye, no clear reason, just silence. And for years, fans have tried to piece it together. Some swore it was AIDS that took her. Others thought it was hepatitis, maybe even something else entirely. But now, after decades of guessing, the producer of Forrest Gump has finally spoken out. And what he revealed about Jenny's death changes everything. So, what really happened to Jenny? And why was the truth buried for so long? Join us as we take a trip down memory lane. The bold decision that made Tom Hanks a fortune from Forrest Gump. When Tom Hanks agreed to play Forrest Gump, he didn't just step into a role, he made one of the smartest moves in Hollywood history. Instead of taking a paycheck, Hanks turned down a salary and asked for a piece of the film's earnings. At the time, it sounded risky. But when Forrest Gump hit theaters, it didn't just become a hit, it exploded. The film raked in over $677 million, turning that bold choice into a goldmine. By the end of it all, Hanks reportedly walked away with more than $60 million, a payday that few actors could dream of. But it wasn't just about the money. His performance as the gentle, unforgettable Forrest didn't just capture hearts. It made history. Hanks went on to win the Academy Award for Best Actor, marking the second year in a row he took home the top honor after winning the previous year for Philadelphia. It wasn't luck, it was instinct, timing, and pure faith in a story that no one could forget. And that decision didn't just make him rich. It sealed his place as one of Hollywood's most brilliant storytellers. The heartbreaking truth about Bubba. Why Mykelti Williamson couldn't find work after Forrest Gump. Mykelti Williamson gave the world one of the most unforgettable characters in Forrest Gump, Bubba, the shrimp-loving soldier whose bond with Forrest became one of the film's emotional anchors. But after the movie's massive success, something strange happened. Instead of his career taking off, it completely stalled. During an interview with USA Today, Williamson revealed that after Forrest Gump, he couldn't get a job. Hollywood didn't even recognize him. Many people genuinely believed the director had plucked a weird-looking guy off the street and put him on camera. They had no idea that Williamson had worn a lip device for the role, or that he was already an established actor who had appeared in 11 TV series before Forrest Gump. Audiences were just as stunned when they saw him later on television. They expected Bubba, the awkward, wide-lipped soldier, and instead saw the real Mykelti Williamson. Eventually, he fought his way back, proving his talent all over again in hits like Con Air, Heat, and Fences. But for years, the role that should have made him a star nearly buried his career instead. The scene that almost killed Forrest Gump and how Tom Hanks saved it. The running scenes in Forrest Gump are legendary. Those wide, sunlit shots of Forrest sprinting across America have become part of movie history. But what most people don't know is that those very scenes almost never happened. In fact, the entire film came dangerously close to being shut down because of them. Tom Hanks once revealed that the studio was just a day away from pulling the plug. The budget had run dry, and the studio refused to fund the running sequence. That was when director Robert Zemeckis showed up at Hanks's house with a desperate plea. He told him, "This movie is going to fall apart because they won't give us the money for this one sequence, and we have to have it." Instead of watching the dream crumble, Hanks and Zemeckis made a bold decision. They pulled money from their own pockets and split the cost themselves, saving the movie just 48 hours before it was set to collapse. That last-minute gamble didn't just rescue a scene, it saved Forrest Gump itself, turning what could have been a canceled project into one of the greatest films ever made, The Surprising Truth About Forrest's Mom. In Forrest Gump, Sally Field played the loving, wise, and protective Mama Gump, a woman whose words molded Forrest's life. But here's the twist most fans never saw coming. In real life, Sally Field was only 10 years older than Tom Hanks. That's right, Hollywood makeup magic turned a woman barely older than her son into a believable Southern mother. The transformation was so convincing that audiences never questioned it for a second. But what makes it even wilder is that just a few years before Forrest Gump, Hanks and Field had actually played love interests in the 1988 comedy Punchline. In that film, Field played Lila Kritzik, a struggling stand-up comic who falls for Hanks's character, Stephen Gold. So, imagine that. One moment, they're sharing romantic chemistry on screen, and the next, she's playing his mother. Talk about range. Yet somehow, they made both relationships work perfectly. Whether as lovers or as mother and son, Sally Field and Tom Hanks pulled it off so seamlessly that audiences forgot the truth and believed every moment of it. Tiny mistakes you never noticed in Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump may be one of the most flawless films ever made, but even perfection has its little cracks. Over the years, eagle-eyed fans have spotted a few small bloopers hidden behind the movie's magic. Details so subtle most people never noticed them. Take the scene where Jenny slips into the wild 70s, experimenting with drugs while Get Down Tonight plays in the background. It fits the vibe perfectly, except for one small thing. The song wasn't released until 1975, and that scene was set in 1974. A tiny slip, but one that fans caught. Then there's Jenny's 4th of July visit in 1976. The Statue of Liberty stands proud behind her, holding a shining gold torch, a beautiful image, but another anachronism. The statue didn't get that golden torch until its 1986 restoration. And remember when Forrest's shrimp business finally takes off? The shrimp he hauls onto the boat look perfect. Maybe a little too perfect. They're already dead and headless, like something straight from a seafood market. They're small, harmless mistakes, but in a movie that feels so real, even the tiniest bloopers remind us that some of Forrest Gump's magic was movie-made. The hidden meaning behind Forrest's blue checkered shirts. If you've watched Forrest Gump closely, you've probably noticed something curious. Forrest always seems to wear blue checkered shirts. It's not random, and it's definitely not a lazy wardrobe choice. That small detail actually carries a powerful meaning. The blue checkered shirts symbolize transition, the turning points in Forrest's life, and the moments when everything shifts. In nearly every major age jump throughout the film, Forrest is seen wearing a version of those blue checks. Whether he's a boy running from bullies, a young man heading off to war, or an adult stepping into a new chapter, the shirt is always there, marking change without ever saying a word. And it doesn't stop with Forrest. The movie's final scene shows his son, little Forrest, wearing that same pattern as he gets on the school bus, mirroring his father's first scene from decades before. The cast and crew never confirmed the meaning behind it, but fans pieced it together, turning it into one of the film's most touching Easter eggs. It's subtle, emotional, and yet symbolic. It ties together Forrest's journey, from the boy with braces to the man who lived a life no one saw coming. The real story behind Forrest Gump's cross-country run. One of the most unforgettable moments in Forrest Gump is when Forrest suddenly decides to run across the entire country. No plan, no reason, just instinct. He runs back and forth 4 times, capturing the hearts of everyone watching. But what most people don't know is that this powerful scene wasn't just fiction. It was inspired by a true story. In 1982, a 16-year-old named Louis Michael Figueroa ran from the East Coast all the way to the West to raise awareness and money for the American Cancer Society. At just 16, he became the youngest and fastest person to ever make the trek. His journey was grueling, but his spirit never broke, And somewhere along the way, he shared a line that would later become iconic. "When I got tired, I slept. When I got hungry, I ate. When I had to go, I went." Sound familiar? Those very words found their way into Forrest Gump. Figueroa's real-life run became the heartbeat behind one of cinema's most emotional sequences. A moment that reminded us all that sometimes running isn't about where you're going, but about what you're leaving behind. The surprising truth about who almost played Jenny in Forrest Gump. It's hard to imagine anyone but Robin Wright as Jenny, the free-spirited girl who stole Forrest's heart and broke ours in the process. Her performance was haunting, tender, and unforgettable, earning her nominations for both a Golden Globe and a Screen Actors Guild Award. But here's the twist. Robin Wright wasn't the studio's first choice. Before Wright stepped into the role, Forrest Gump's producers had their eyes on some of Hollywood's biggest names. Jodie Foster and Demi Moore were both offered the part but turned it down. Even Nicole Kidman was considered, but she refused to do a screen test. It was only after those rejections that Wright got her chance, and she turned what could have been a backup role into something iconic. Wright had already made a name for herself as Kelly Capwell on the NBC daytime soap Santa Barbara. But Forrest Gump catapulted her into a different league. Since then, she's continued to dominate the screen, from her Golden Globe-winning role as Claire Underwood in House of Cards to her striking performance as Lieutenant Joshi in Blade Runner 2049. In the end, Jenny's role found exactly who it was meant for, and movie history was made. The shocking list of actors who turned down Forrest Gump. It's almost impossible to picture anyone but Tom Hanks sitting on that park bench, telling stories about life, love, and a box of chocolates. But here's the wild truth. Hanks wasn't the studio's first choice for Forrest Gump. In fact, he wasn't even second or third. The role was first offered to John Travolta, who turned it down to star in Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction that same year. While Pulp Fiction became a hit, Travolta later admitted that passing on Forrest Gump was one of the biggest mistakes of his career. After Travolta, the role went to Chevy Chase and Bill Murray, and both walked away too. Even the author of the original Forrest Gump novel, Winston Groom, had his own idea of who should play the slow-talking Southern hero. He pushed for John Goodman, believing he was the perfect fit for Forrest's blend of innocence and strength. But fate clearly had other plans. When Tom Hanks finally took the role, he didn't just play Forrest, he became him. His performance turned what could have been another Hollywood what-if into one of the greatest characters ever brought to screen. The deleted Forrest Gump scene, featuring Martin Luther King Jr. Forrest Gump was full of moments where fiction brushed shoulders with history, with Forrest shaking hands with presidents, inspiring Elvis, and appearing beside John Lennon. But there was one powerful scene that never made it to the final cut, one that could have changed the entire tone of the movie. Director Robert Zemeckis actually filmed a sequence where Forrest crosses paths with Martin Luther King Jr. and his supporters during a civil rights march. In the scene, tensions rise as police dogs are released to attack the crowd. But instead of violence, something unexpectedly Forrest happens. Forrest, in his pure, childlike way, mistakes the chaos for a game and starts playing fetch with the dogs. The moment diffuses the danger completely. Forrest tosses a stick, the dogs chase after it, and suddenly, the violence disappears. Turning to King, Forrest simply says, "Sorry to interrupt your parade. They're just dogs, and they don't know any better." It's a scene that perfectly captures the heart of Forrest Gump. A man too simple to understand hate, yet somehow able to stop it. Though it never made the final cut, it remains one of the most fascinating what could have been moments in film history. The secret behind Forrest Gump's famous run. Everyone remembers Forrest Gump's run, that unmistakable stride that carried him across the country and straight into movie history. But here's something most fans don't know. Not all of that running was actually done by Tom Hanks. Behind the camera, it was often his younger brother, Jim Hanks, doing the heavy lifting, or rather, the heavy running. Jim doesn't just look like Tom, he sounds like him too. In fact, back in 1995, a current affair revealed that Tom Hanks had borrowed many of Forrest's quirky movements from Jim's earlier role as Jeter in Buford's Beach Bunnies. One of those little quirks was that famous, slightly awkward, jerky run that became a defining part of Forrest's character. So, when the film called for wide shots of Forrest sprinting through deserts, cities, and small towns across America, it was often Jim out there doing the miles. And this isn't the only time he stepped into his brother's shoes. Thanks to their nearly identical voices, Jim has also voiced Sheriff Woody in Toy Story video games and spin-offs. Turns out, Forrest Gump's heart might have been all Tom, but those long-running legs were a family effort. The famous faces who turned down Bubba in Forrest Gump. It's hard to picture anyone but Kelty Williamson as Bubba, the sweet, shrimp-obsessed soldier whose friendship with Forrest became the heart of the film. But when Forrest Gump was first being cast, Hollywood had a completely different vision for the role. In fact, some of the biggest names in comedy were offered the part, and all of them turned it down. The producers first reached out to Ice Cube, David Alan Grier, and Dave Chappelle, hoping one of them would bring Bubba to life. But each one passed. Ice Cube reportedly didn't think the role was right for him, while Chappelle later admitted he simply didn't believe the movie would work. After Forrest Gump became a massive global hit, Chappelle confessed that he regretted turning it down. It's one of those classic Hollywood what-ifs. The role could have introduced Chappelle, or any of those comedy giants, to an even wider audience years before their big breaks. But fate had its own plan. And funnily enough, a few years later, Chappelle ended up working with Tom Hanks anyway, playing his sidekick in the 1998 rom-com You've Got Mail, the Forrest Gump sequel that was written but never made. Believe it or not, there's a Forrest Gump sequel that actually exists. Well, at least on paper. Screenwriter Eric Roth, along with director Robert Zemeckis and Tom Hanks, once revealed in an interview with USA Today that a full sequel script had been written but never produced. And the storyline? It's every bit as wild, emotional, and unpredictable as the first film. The sequel would have followed Forrest through another string of unbelievable encounters, crossing paths with O.J. Simpson and Princess Diana, among others. Hanks even joked that if Forrest had lived through the 2000s, he probably would have chatted up Mark Zuckerberg and the Winklevoss twins about how it'd be nice to have a book that shows people's faces and helps you make friends. The script also imagined Forrest playing a quiet but crucial role in real events, helping with Hurricane Katrina relief efforts, and even being the reason Navy SEALs found Osama bin Laden. It's a sequel that could have taken Forrest's innocent charm into an entirely new era. But in the end, the team decided to leave the story where it was, timeless, untouchable, and perfect, just the way it ended. What happened to the famous Forrest Gump bench? Few movie scenes are as instantly recognizable as Forrest Gump sitting on that park bench, telling strangers about his life and a box of chocolates. That simple wooden seat became a piece of movie history. But here's the twist. The bench wasn't real. The scene was filmed in Chippewa Square in Savannah, Georgia. In the movie's opening, a white feather drifts through the air and lands right at Forrest's feet as he sits on the bench. But that bench wasn't a permanent part of the park. It was a movie prop, placed there just for filming. After production wrapped, it was removed and later placed inside the Savannah History Museum, where it's now protected as a cinematic treasure. Still, the empty spot where it once sat has become sacred ground for fans. Visitors from all over the world stop by Chippewa Square just to take photos, often sitting on the curb or another bench nearby, imagining Forrest right beside them, telling his story all over again. So, if you ever find yourself there, don't forget to bring your own box of chocolates. Because, as we all know, life's sweetest moments are meant to be shared. The surprising truth about where Forrest Gump was really filmed. You might think Forrest Gump took audiences all over the world, from the battlefields of Vietnam to the heart of Alabama, but here's the secret. Almost the entire movie was filmed right in Georgia and South Carolina. No international travel, no distant jungles, just movie magic and some clever editing. The film's Vietnam scenes were actually shot around Savannah, Georgia, and near Beaufort, South Carolina. To complete the illusion, filmmakers added CGI mountains in the background to mimic the look and feel of Vietnam's terrain. The result? Perfectly believable and breathtaking. The beloved hometown of Greenbow, Alabama, where Forrest grows up, was also an illusion. Those scenes were filmed in a small town called Varnville, about 35 miles northwest of Beaufort. Even Forrest's home and Jenny's farmhouse weren't real. They were built from scratch on Bluff Plantation between Varnville and Beaufort just for the movie. And once filming wrapped, both houses were torn down, leaving nothing but memories and movie history behind. It's proof that you don't need to go far to create a world that feels larger than life. Sometimes, all it takes is the right place and a story worth believing in. The ping-pong secret you never knew about Forrest Gump. We've all seen it. Forrest Gump standing there, paddle in hand, locked in a lightning-fast ping-pong rally that looks almost too good to be true. And that's because it was. You might have wondered how long Tom Hanks had to train to pull off those moves, or how many hours it took to make his skills look that flawless. The truth? He didn't practice at all. That jaw-dropping ping-pong scene wasn't about skill, it was all about special effects. While Hanks was already a decent ping-pong player in real life, he wasn't nearly at the level of a world champion. So the filmmakers found a smarter way to make it work. They had Hanks mime every movement, matching the rhythm and reactions perfectly. Then, through some early but impressive CGI, the ping-pong balls were added later, animated frame by frame to look completely real. It's one of those moments where Hollywood trickery blended seamlessly with storytelling magic, because even without a single real ping-pong ball, Forrest Gump made us believe every serve, every spin, and every victory was 100% real. The real story behind Forrest Gump's iconic accent. Forrest Gump's soft Southern drawl is one of the most recognizable voices in movie history. But here's what most people don't know. Tom Hanks didn't invent that accent on his own. The voice that became so iconic actually came from the child actor who played young Forrest, Michael Connor Humphreys. Humphreys, who grew up in Mississippi, had a naturally thick Southern accent. During filming, it became clear that he couldn't quite mimic Hanks's speech pattern to keep the character consistent. So, instead of forcing the young actor to change, Hanks flipped the script. He decided he would learn to talk like the kid. In a 2015 interview on The Graham Norton Show, Hanks revealed that he spent hours recording and chatting with young Humphreys just to capture his unique cadence. Somewhere, Hanks said, "I have cassettes, hours and hours of me just making chit-chat with a very young Michael Connor Humphreys. He was like 7 or 8 years old. That was the vernacular we spoke in, and that was priceless." That decision gave Forrest his voice. Gentle, honest, and unforgettable. A perfect reflection of the character's heart, born straight from a Mississippi boy's natural twang. The secret behind Forrest Gump's all-American soundtrack. Forrest Gump didn't just move people with its story, it captured an entire generation through its music. The film's soundtrack is packed with over 32 iconic songs, each one perfectly placed to reflect America's shifting decades. But here's something most fans never realized. Every single band featured in the film was American. And that was no accident. Joel Sill, the movie's executive music producer, revealed that this was a deliberate choice. Director Robert Zemeckis was adamant that Forrest Gump should sound as American as it felt. "All the material in there is American," Sill told the Los Angeles Daily News. Bob felt strongly about it. He felt Forrest wouldn't buy anything not American, and the audience loved it. The soundtrack became one of the best-selling movie albums ever, moving over 12 million copies worldwide. From Elvis Presley to Lynyrd Skynyrd, every note carried the pulse of American life, raw, nostalgic, and unforgettable. The only exception came years later when Fleetwood Mac, originally formed in England, contributed to the special collector's edition soundtrack in 2001. Still, at its core, Forrest Gump's music was, and always will be, 100% American soul. The iconic Forrest Gump line, Tom Hanks made up on the spot. Forrest Gump gave the world some of the most memorable movie quotes ever written. "Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get," became so iconic it landed at number 40 on the AFI's list of 100 greatest movie quotes. After the film's release, fans even started mailing boxes of chocolates to Tom Hanks as a tribute to the line that defined the film. But here's something few people know. One of Forrest Gump's other famous quotes wasn't even scripted. During filming, Hanks spontaneously came up with the line, "My name is Forrest Gump. People call me Forrest Gump." It was simple, awkward, and absolutely perfect. Director Robert Zemeckis loved it instantly. It captured everything that made Forrest who he was. Earnest, literal, and unintentionally funny. So he kept it in the final cut. And just like that, a completely improvised moment became history. The mystery behind who really voiced Elvis in Forrest Gump. Every Forrest Gump fan remembers that early scene. Young Forrest showing off his quirky dance moves while a mysterious man with a guitar plays in his room. That man, of course, is meant to be Elvis Presley, and it's one of the film's most memorable nods to pop culture. But here's the thing. No one actually knows for sure who voiced Elvis in that scene. The actor playing Elvis on screen was never credited, leaving fans puzzled for decades. Some believe it was Kurt Russell, who had already perfected his Elvis impersonation years earlier when he played the King in the 1979 biopic Elvis. Even IMDb lists him as the voice behind the performance, claiming his cameo went uncredited, but Paramount never confirmed it, and neither did Russell. That's where another theory comes in. Many fans argue that the voice actually belongs to Peter Dobson, the actor who physically portrayed Elvis in the film. Despite endless speculation, the studio has stayed silent, keeping the mystery alive. The tourist who accidentally became part of Forrest Gump. One of the wildest behind-the-scenes stories from Forrest Gump happened completely by chance. Remember the scene where Forrest arrives in Washington, D.C. after returning from Vietnam and gets stopped by a reporter? You'd assume the man holding the microphone was just another background actor, but he wasn't. He was actually a random tourist who just happened to be in the right place at the right time. As the story goes, the crew was setting up the scene when they spotted a man walking down the street with his wife. They approached him, handed him a few lines, and asked if he wanted to be in a movie. Moments later, that unsuspecting tourist found himself face-to-face with Tom Hanks, camera rolling, playing a reporter on the National Mall. No headshots, no auditions, just pure luck and perfect timing. The man agreed, delivered his lines, and forever became part of one of Hollywood's most beloved films. Imagine that. 1 minute you're sightseeing in D.C., and the next, you're in a blockbuster classic that generations would watch for decades. Now that's a vacation story worth bragging about. The heartbreaking truth about Jenny's death in Forrest Gump. Jenny's story in Forrest Gump is one of love, loss, and painful mystery. She was the girl who dreamed of flying far away from her pain, the one Forrest loved unconditionally from childhood until the day she died. But even decades after the film's release, fans are still asking the same haunting question: what really killed Jenny? In the movie, her illness is described only as a virus that doctors can't explain. Set in the early 1980s, many assumed this meant HIV/AIDS, especially given Jenny's wild, free-spirited lifestyle and her years of drug use. Yet director Robert Zemeckis once clarified that the film never names her disease on purpose. "It could have been," he said, "but it didn't matter. Everyone thought that because it was so topical in the era, but we never said it in the movie. We didn't want that to be the issue." Still, fans quickly found holes in the HIV theory. If Jenny had AIDS, wouldn't Forrest or Forrest Jr. have been infected too? The timeline also adds confusion. Jenny's tombstone reveals she was born July 16, 1945, and died March 22, 1982, at just 36 years old. Her death came before AIDS was even widely diagnosed or understood. Years later, screenwriter Eric Roth finally addressed the question. In a 2019 interview, he revealed that Jenny's illness was intended to be late-stage HIV, confirming that the abandoned Forrest Gump sequel was even supposed to open with Forrest Jr. suffering from the same disease. But the author of the original novel, Winston Groom, wrote something entirely different. In his second book, Jenny dies of hepatitis C, and that explanation makes sense too. Hepatitis C, discovered in 1989, spreads through blood contact and shared needles, something that fits Jenny's troubled past. Doctors in the early 80s wouldn't have recognized it, which matches her diagnosis of a virus they can't explain. Whether it was AIDS or hepatitis C, one truth remains. Jenny's death wasn't just another plot point. It was the emotional punch that defined the story's ending. She and Forrest had finally found each other after a lifetime of missed chances, only for time to run out. She died just months before turning 37, leaving Forrest and their son behind. The two had been married for less than a year, but their connection, the kind that started with two scared kids under a tree, never faded. In the end, Forrest Gump never needed to tell us exactly what took Jenny's life. The point wasn't how she died, but how deeply she lived, and how fiercely Forrest loved her, even when the world didn't. What do you think Jenny really died from? Do you believe it was AIDS, hepatitis C, or something else entirely? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You'll enjoy it.